Hello there, people. My name is John Kirsch, and today, for today's Mug Author topic, we're going to talk about the Great MacGuffin. Now, most of you probably know what a MacGuffin is. Certainly, if you're a writer or a storyteller, you probably know what a MacGuffin is. But I'm going to do a particular take on it today, especially focused on as far as the MacGuffin as an object of influence, power, or importance. And basically, what I want to talk about is how you can make in your storytelling or stories or writing, how you can kind of take your MacGuffin to the next level and make your stories better. So just to start out, though, just so we're all kind of on the similar page, what is a MacGuffin traditionally? So here's just kind of one or two boilerplate definitions or aspects of a MacGuffin definition that you'll usually see. So a MacGuffin is often that object or device in a movie or a book or a story that serves as a trigger for the plot. So it's often, for example, what springs the characters, both the good guys and the bad guys, into action. It's sort of that, maybe that object that everybody's after. It's that event maybe. It doesn't have to be an object. It could be an event or even a person. But today, in my Great MacGuffin video, I want to focus on how do you as a storyteller make interesting, worthwhile MacGuffins, insert those into your stories? And what's the difference between a MacGuffin well done versus a MacGuffin poorly done? So without further ado, let's get into it. One thing that I want to stress is part of the reason I wanted to make this video is one of the books I'm reading right now is called A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. You've probably heard, if you like anything related to paranormal fiction, you've probably heard of this book. But the reason I decided to make this video is she is a great example of how to very skillfully use a MacGuffin. So in A Discovery of Witches, the main character, Diana, who is a sort of a witch with latent powers, while she's doing research at the Bodleian Library, uses this ancient manuscript called Ashmole 782. And it turns out that this manuscript, I'm not going to put in any spoilers in case you read the book, but this manuscript turns out to have incredible importance as the story progresses, and it disappears and goes missing. And throughout the story, various powers, various different factions are trying to find and capture this manuscript for reasons of their own. And so, but one thing that struck me about A Discovery of Witches is how well Deborah Harkness makes this manuscript. She gives it this aura of mystery. You want to know who wrote it. You want to know what's the significance of it. There's there's tantalizing symbolism in the book. There's illustrations. It's sort of like an illuminated manuscript. So there are these there's the symbology to it, and how it relates to the origins of vampires, demons, and witches. And it struck me as really it's almost like the quintessential perfect MacGuffin in many ways, because it really does, it imbues the story with this extra element of mystery and kind of this buildup of curiosity as the reader, is wondering how this is going to play into the story and how this is going to influence the main protagonist's future. So, okay, so I'm going to back up now. So that's kind of I think a great example of how MacGuffins can be done really well. But here's some more popular examples that probably anyone watching this video has heard of. If you're familiar with the original Indiana Jones trilogy, you've got Raiders of the Lost Ark, you've got The Last Crusade, and what do both of those movies have in common? An awesome, enthralling MacGuffin. You've got the Ark of the Covenant, right? A lot of mystery there. You don't know. In fact, throughout most of the movie, the characters, including Indiana Jones, he doesn't really know what the Ark is going to do. He knows it's an artifact of great power, but he has no idea if it's actually found, what actually will transpire, right? So, I mean, there's sort of like some foreboding there about, well, this object of power was not meant to be used by man or by humans, right? So there's this air of mystery and this air of danger to it, but it's not spelled out, right? There's this aura of, again, mystery. So to me, there's three, I think, key elements for instilling your story with a quote great MacGuffin. And to me, the first one of those is aura of mystery. you should have around your MacGuffin some sort of aura of mystery, some sort of aura of, the characters, if the characters know exactly what this MacGuffin is going to do and exactly how it's going to help them, or, if they have it all figured out, like once they find this thing, what they're going to do, to my mind, that's not as interesting. I don't think that's nearly as compelling for a story as a MacGuffin where there are uncertainties, as a MacGuffin where you don't know for sure what's going to happen. Just like the characters, you are left in the dark. And that sort of uncertainty creates, again, this buildup and anticipation, right? That I think without that, the MacGuffin doesn't have the same sort of compelling narrative to it, right? It doesn't quite, it's not quite as enthralling if it's simplistic and obvious, right? So for me, of the three key elements of a great MacGuffin, mystery is top, is one of the top. You see, and again, going back to the Indiana Jones movies, the third one, Last Crusade, again, the Grail, the cup. Again, they don't know for sure what that's going to do. They don't know for sure that it's going to have the power to heal. That's, again, that's part of the buildup, part of the mystery. They don't even know for sure what the cup looks like, right? There's a lot of mystery around this object. And so, again, that kind of really adds an extra layer to the story. It makes almost, it's like the MacGuffin, if done right, almost becomes another character in the story. So again, that's why mystery, I think, is important. You even see this in, of course, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The One Ring as a MacGuffin, yes, they know about its malevolent influence, but even there's this air of mystery to it. There's an enigmatic quality to it because it affects each wearer very differently. And this is commented on throughout the story, throughout Tolkien's work, how, one person might wear the ring and it might affect them one way or corrupt them in one way, and then another person might wear the ring and it might corrupt them at an entirely different pace and have a much more pronounced effect. So how the ring interacts with the wearer is different each time based on the wearer's own innate properties and their own innate personality and morals and ethics and personality and all that stuff. So again, the One Ring's, I think, another example of a great MacGuffin because it's got that unknown quantity to it. Another aspect of it is, and this also the One Ring, I think, adequate, or also exemplifies this, is a second element I think you need in a great MacGuffin is complexity. So not just mystery, but complexity. And again, the One Ring fits this very well because it's very complex. It's, as I said before, it interacts with each person differently. It's single-minded in wanting this malign influence, but how it does not affect any two people in the exact same way. So that really, again, that gives it complexity and makes it so that the One Ring, is something that it feels real, because real life is complex, and the One Ring, it doesn't affect everyone the same, and that feels real in a way in the story. So complexity is important too. A third thing is relevance. And this is where I actually undermine, in some ways, I think a great MacGuffin undermines the what you might call the traditional definition of a MacGuffin, and I think should transcend that. Because a traditional MacGuffin, a lot of times people will say, well, a traditional MacGuffin is, just a device merely as a trigger for the plot. So, it could be any object almost, but it's really, the object by itself is not necessarily relevant or important. And while that's true, I think that a truly masterful MacGuffin, one that really kind of draws your reader further into the story, or draws your listener into the story, or viewer into the story, is going to actually maybe have that importance and relevancy in its own right. So again, I'm going to go back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant is an important object in Judeo-Christian history, has value and relevancy in its own right. And I don't think it's an accident that you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark and it's significantly more popular than, say, Temple of Doom, which although is a great movie as the second film in that Indiana Jones trilogy, doesn't have that compelling MacGuffin to it that the Raiders of the Lost Ark does, or even the Last Crusade does. Because again, in Last Crusade, you have the Holy Grail, which going back to medieval lore and medieval tradition has all this relevancy and importance attached to it, for what it symbolizes and what it represents. So in a sense, I kind of disagree with the boilerplate MacGuffin. Not disagree so much, but I feel like to truly have a great MacGuffin in your story as a writer, storyteller, screenwriter, whatever you may be, you should actually have a MacGuffin that has some value in its own right, that has some importance in its own right. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, I think if your MacGuffin almost becomes like a secondary character in your story, that is going to enthrall the reader and spark that curiosity in whoever your audience is. Last but not least, because I want to keep this video relatively concise, how do you not do a MacGuffin? What's an example of what to avoid? I think one great example is some stories who truly do use the MacGuffin as just a plot device and don't try to develop it at all. Actually, I think that disappoints the reader and I kind of think it somewhat insults the reader's intelligence. So I was talking to a friend who is reading a story. It's about a girl who's at an academy for people with special powers, and she wants to find, apparently on each family has sort of like the administrators of this Academy for Magic Users has like a special file on each family and their family history and what abilities they have and what their magical sort of ancestry is. And so she sneaks in and steals the folder for her family with her family's records in it to hope to learn more about herself. And over the course of that, after she does this, the story continues on, and the author sort of forgets about it. Never mentions these records again, never mentions what the character may have discovered or learned about herself or about her family from these records. And so this great MacGuffin, which, was something she was having to clandestinely, illicitly steal, is just suddenly forgotten. And so as the reader, you're kind of left scratching your head wondering, why did we spend time on this? Why is this suddenly not important? It really pulls you out of the story, right? Because, that's not very realistic. You'd expect something that important would then somehow affect the character's actions in the future and certainly inform them about who they are. So again, that's an example of one example of, how not to do a MacGuffin is if you are too explicit and nakedly using that as a plot device, your reader's going to notice. If you used a MacGuffin just to get a character to a certain place, and then so something could happen to them, but they didn't interact with the MacGuffin as a real person would have, then readers are probably going to notice that. So that's just something to be aware of. So just to kind of recap, so I think MacGuffins are kind of sometimes underappreciated in how cool they can be, how important and enthralling they can be to a good story. And so I think a truly great MacGuffin, has those three main elements of something that's got mystery to it, something that's got complexity, and something that's important and somehow relevant in its own right. I think those three things can create, when you have mystery, complexity, and importance, all kind of bundled up into your MacGuffin, I think that makes for a more compelling story. All right. Well, thanks again for listening. Just some food for thought. You all have a good one.